Hi, this is Danielle Paige, and welcome home to the Cosmic Body Podcast, a place where we talk about everything mind, body, soul, and stars so that you can remember your highest potential while navigating your human journey. And when you embody that, you begin to understand that everything is connected and you're more than just a human being. You're truly a cosmic body. Hello, and welcome back to Cosmic Body Podcast. We have a special guest today that's truly going to talk about the real definition of what a cosmic body is and why I named this podcast Cosmic Body, because we are so much more than just the body, so much more than our mind. We are the stars, we are the soul, we are emotions, we are everything mixed together. So welcome my guest. He's a body therapist, Edan Harari. Thank you so much for being here today. Appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, Danielle.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a lot to talk about, and I really wanted you to come on. One, because I had a session with you, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, and it was incredible. I actually had 2 sessions with you, and it was incredible. But more than that, this is so deeply meaningful to me because the work that I do in the world is also to help bring people back to their heart and their soul and their body and to clear their junk. And I know, because I went through Lyme disease, of how much the mind body is so connected, right? I had to learn that. That was part of why I contracted that for my journey. So I also understand, though, if someone didn't go through a health crisis like that, they might not be aware of how deeply connected the mind and the body and our traumas and how things get stuck in our bodies. So I want to get into everything today, but can you tell us a little bit about your background, how you started, and then we can kind of move into that journey?
Sure. So, yeah, I started off by just going through many different types of healing experiences and healing crises, if you will, from a young age. And I always found myself just good with my hands and just always touching people's bodies, doing massage, and just like started from the age of 3 when I was walking on my dad's back when I was a kid.
Oh,
So I
wow.
feel like in terms of like my intuitive capacities, I've been building that since that time. But the way it really started was my first like episode when I was 21, and I had found myself losing touch with reality. I went into what
Yeah.
people call a manic episode, or was diagnosed bipolar. I had to check myself into a hospital, and it was quite a journey. And what happened there was essentially that I exploded because I was holding on to my emotions in my body for all those years, and I wasn't given permission to express my anger. And growing up, I wasn't given permission to express my anger, and I just literally exploded at the age of 21, and uh, found myself having to check myself into a hospital to regulate my nervous system, essentially, which is what I do now with my clients. And but my journey started even before that. When I was 18, doing I was teaching yoga. I started teaching yoga when I was 21, but then I basically was doing yoga from the age of 18, and I found that that was helping me to be able to not have to smoke cannabis every day to be calm, because I found myself suffering from anxiety. And it's a long story of like all my healing experience that I had to go through. But your question is asking me how I got, like how I started doing this work, or like what my experience
Yeah, what
is.
led you into this? Because this is so specific and you've had to learn so much. And, it's not like you just went to a weekend course. You've been studying this so much and you had firsthand experience, it sounds like. So, yeah, what led you to be here right now?
Yeah, I mean, basically, all my experiences of having to go through healing crisis and both physical and mental dysfunctions and ailments through my life that actually got me to heal myself with the modalities that I use now. So it was a long road, and it's a very long story of my story of how I healed myself through many different ailments. It started off with my first surgery at the age of 3, and then eventually my next surgery at the age of 8. Then I went into broken bone at the age of 10, another broken bone at the age of 22. Then I tore my Achilles tendon. So I've been through a lot of physical ailments and injuries, and also suffering from cluster headaches. And so I practice over 7 different modalities in my healing system. And each of those modalities along my path and along my healing path, I've utilized in order to heal myself. And I've seen practitioners who have supported me with those modalities. So fast forward, now I just turned 45, and let's say I have over 2,500 hours of training that's actual formal education from school, starting off with studying with, yoga and practicing and teaching yoga, then eventually to massage therapy school, then eventually studying orthobionomy, which is an osteopathic based manual therapy system of healing. Then I studied myofascial release with John Barnes as a physical therapist. Then I studied somatic touch therapy, or specifically it's something called orgone therapy, which is what I'm known for now, which is the emotional release energy work that I do. That's very hands-on. I would call it a somatic touch therapy. So yeah, let's just say it's been a long journey, lots of education through the way, of actually learning again with my like building my touch capacity from the age of 3, and then my formal knowledge and training started in my early 20s, and then again I went to massage therapy school in my 30s, and graduated massage therapy school in 2008. And then I just kept continuing and continuing my education to get to the point where I'm at 2,500 hours. Why? Because I kept finding myself realizing that I was limited with what I knew in terms of serving my clients and supporting my clients. I've been in practice now professionally for over 16 years now, between New York and Miami mostly. And I do travel the world as well to see clients all over the world, because there's really, unfortunately, not many people in the world who do what I do. And so yeah, I hope that answers your question, because it's a long story of how I've cultivated my capacities, because it's both intuitive. I do have a gift in my hands. So it's important that I started working on that gift and realizing my calling and my gift in my hands since I was a kid. And then eventually decided to take that and learn and study all the way, and actually really gain the formal knowledge that's required to be able, in anatomy and physiology, to be able to support people and help people in healing.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I want to talk about your hands in a moment because I think that's really important. But talk to us a little bit about what you have found with the emotions, with feelings, because I talk about this all the time, but I want to hear this from you. I want my audience to truly hear it from someone that's doing this day in and day out, of what happens with our emotions. It's in our subconscious, our body is our subconscious. So, can you talk about that? Because I think there's a lot of people that might be familiar with this, but there's also a lot of people that this is new to them. And I really, with this podcast, I want to bring in new concepts and new ways to heal and bring yourself back to homeostasis.
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, we need to realize that our subconscious mind is our body, and our body acts as the subconscious mind. And there's parts of us that we're not fully connected to. Our conscious mind is our usual conscious thoughts that we're aware of, and our thinking and our programs and all that. And then the subconscious mind is much deeper. We're not fully connected to it. And so what I do is actually work with the body as the subconscious mind and help you access different memories and perhaps traumas and emotions that are stored in your body. Specifically in our fascia. The fascia is the connective tissue matrix that is basically like the container of everything in our body. Our muscles, our bones, our joints, our brain, like everything in our body, every organ and joint and muscle and tissue in our body is actually within this fascial web. It's very web-like. And what it is, it's a full body system. And I'm a specialist that works specifically with the fascia, but the goal of my work is actually to release the emotions and the trauma and the memories that are stored in our fascial web, which is actually also the subconscious mind. There are different things that come up in sessions where people just don't remember them, and all of a sudden they're coming up and they're like, oh my God, like I'm remembering now when I was 5 years old and this experience happened to me. And all of that is, again, it's in our body as the subconscious mind and in our fascial web. And I studied something called myofascial release as well through my training and through the years, which is all about releasing the connective tissue pressure in our body. And what I noticed doing that was that people were having emotional releases. And it's because the container, which is the fascia, is a protective system. So when we feel really stressed, right, our body tenses up. When we're in fear-based mode or survival mode, right, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, what's happening is our body gets contracted and our fascial web has it's like builds pressure. So just think of it as like a highly pressurized system.
Yeah.
And each time that we have a stressful life experience, where we could either just say it's a high stress experience in our life, or it could be an actual traumatic experience, which, believe it or not, me going through a surgery is trauma
Mhm.
for my body. So
Yeah.
I'm going in consciously paying somebody, the surgeon, to cut into my body and to actually open up my fascial container, which is a closed system. And what's happening is that's traumatic to my body, because to my body and my nervous system, it doesn't realize that that is not me being stabbed by somebody,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like
Yep.
what happens is anytime that we get cut into the fascial web, our body tenses up. It's a protective system. So we have scar
Yep.
tissue, right? People know this. When they have a surgery, they end up having some scar tissue or any sort of injury. So we want to think of the fascia again as this closed system that is protecting our vital organs, protecting us, right? And allowing us to even be composed and upright in our bodies. And so memories actually get stored in this fascial web. And it's almost like fiber optic cables, which is very interesting how it works, how data gets transmitted through this system. And memories are stored there in the fascial web. And when we work with the fascia, it can bring up certain memories that we're not fully consciously aware of that were even there, you know? So
Yeah.
very, very often in sessions, I mean, I had one of my sessions was, I tasted a little bit of, anesthesia in the back of my throat. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
what is that? Like, what is that flavor, that metallic flavor?
Yeah.
And it was because my body remembered what it was like to go through the surgeries. I've been through multiple surgeries. So,
Right.
what's interesting is that working with the fascial web and doing these types of therapies, and body work, specifically manual therapy techniques, manual just means hands-on, we are able to access the depths of our essentially our soul, right? I like to actually connect it to
Yeah.
the soul. Like emotions is energy in motion, right? Energy moving
Mm-hmm.
through our body. But when we connect to our emotions, we're actually connecting to the soul level, which is what I find is where we're in that void, in that space of no mind and no thoughts. At least you're not consciously thinking. You're almost like laying there in the treatment and you're watching your body go through this experience where it starts to maybe twitch or shake or move, and you start remembering things from your childhood or several years before, and you're like, whoa, what is this, right? It's fascinating,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, there's so many questions here and so many directions I can go with you because this is really powerful stuff that I feel like, Western medicine doesn't even address and doesn't even acknowledge. I feel like I hope we're getting to a place where it's going to be more mainstream and it's going to be more almost common sense, but I don't think we're there yet. But that's why it's important that we keep having these conversations and share, especially with your background and your education. So if someone is unable to go to you, for example, like right now, and they feel like they have trauma in their body, sometimes it's a conscious thing because we know of an event that happened, but oftentimes there's also subconscious stuff too, right? So it's both, right? We can have a traumatic event, we know that it affected us, and then we might not even know of an event that actually impacted our body. What can people do like right here and right now? Because I always tell my membership, I talk to them about breath, sound, and movement. So important to kind of get things out of the body. So, is there anything that you can recommend? Like right now, if someone can't go to you, if they're not located where you are right now, but we'll talk about that later, what can they do to help themselves with this?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think breath work is an easy access point for most people to go into the depths of that experience
Yeah.
of like going into that subconscious mind. I feel like breath work is something that people can do, but I am also like treading cautiously with that because you want to be able to do that with a facilitator and getting support. I mean, that's why I offer, Zoom
Right.
sessions for people around the world. I mean, and when I do that, when I do work over Zoom, which most of the time I'm doing one-on-one in-person sessions in my practice,
Mm.
but I also work over Zoom for people who can't get access to me. You want to work with breath work as an opportunity to access the subconscious mind. And specifically, I work with holotropic breath work, which
Hmm.
is a very intense, uh,
Very intense.
intense experience of breathing only from the mouth, and it's very rapid, and it can pull you. It puts you into that state of catharsis because that's essentially what I do. Is I actually work with throwing people into the catharsis, people who are ready for that. And so if I can't do that with my hands and with the hands-on techniques, I will use the breath. And so breath work is an access point, but make sure you work with a trained facilitator,
Mhm. Yeah.
such as myself, right? There are other people out
Mhm.
there who are doing this, but proceed with caution. If we're going to be going towards really intense types of body therapies or uh, you know healing experiences like this, we want to be cautious because what happened to me, the reason why I say this is because when I was actually like, what is it, when I was, I think it was 20 years old. When I was 20, I did a Kundalini yoga class, really intense breath work. I didn't know what I was going in for, especially because I was
Mhm.
young, I was not trained, I wasn't
Yeah.
aware. It blasted me open, and I'm already very open. I'm very sensitive. I'm an empath. I feel a
Mhm.
lot, right? I feel a
Yeah.
lot of emotions, a lot of energy of myself, of other people. Sometimes I don't know if it's me or someone else. And so when I was 20 and I did not have the training, the capacity, I wasn't ready for it. I got blasted open with the Kundalini yoga breathwork, experience, and it actually dysregulated me for weeks,
Mhm.
right? So we want to realize that things like this can dysregulate us for a while, and it's
Yeah.
really key and really important that we remember that if we get dysregulated from whether it's breath work or plant medicine or anything like that, um, we want to find our balance again and come back to homeostasis, as you mentioned, which is
Yeah.
stabilizing ourselves again because we get destabilized, where I've had this happen to multiple people throughout my life where I've seen that happen to them. It never happened, thankfully, when I'm supporting them, because what I do is I offer you a week of coaching and support after, where I have this container where I'm holding space for you to
Yeah.
integrate the experience for up to a week after, keeping people safe. The most important thing, I want to really say this, it's really important that we all understand that we need to feel safe when we're doing any
Mhm.
kind of healing work or therapy
Yeah.
work. We need to feel really safe. It has to be also trauma informed. So the facilitator you're working with needs to be trauma informed and aware that if you do have trauma that's stored in your body, that if it comes up, that we have to find a way to get you back to safety and being regulated, because if not, you can get again destabilized, and it can actually, what some people will say, re-traumatize you. And it's not that you're getting re-traumatized, it's that you're getting triggered, and then you don't know how to come back to safety and feeling calm and regulating your nervous system again, right? And that's kind of why I believe that if anybody's doing stuff like this, they need to make sure that they're supporting you
Yeah.
for at least a week after the experience, whether it's plant medicine or breath work.
Mhm.
So I would encourage anyone out there who's doing this to really remember, okay, what if I get destabilized? What if I can't find my balance again, right? And I feel like I'm losing touch with reality, or
Mhm.
maybe I'm stuck in survival mode. We don't want to be stuck in survival mode. Like, we don't want things to end up being worse than when we started, right? So yeah.
I love that you brought that up about the support. And you mentioned Kundalini. So I've been taking Kundalini. I love Kundalini. It's changed my life. I did it. I found a Kundalini VHS tape when I was around 20 something, when I was living with roommates in Boston. And I thought it was regular yoga, and I put it in. And I was like, I don't know what this is. This feels weird, but I kept doing it when my roommates left. And so I've been doing it for like 25 years, right before this, like the whole trend. I was like, I don't know what this is, but I love this. So it has helped me. And then when I had my awakening again at 30, I found Kundalini yoga in LA, and it really helped me. I would just go and I would cry and I would do my thing. I wouldn't even talk to anyone because I was just going through my journey. So it's so important that to find the right modality. But I love what you said, that whether it's Kundalini, whether it's plant medicine, if you've ever been to a Dr. Joe Dispenza retreat, there are people there crying, losing their mind, and a lot of times it's because they've never felt, they've never done anything like this before, right? So you hear that.
Mm.
I've been to many Dr. Joe things, and you're trying to meditate and someone is hysterical and screaming, and sometimes they have to take people out of the room. And it's really important to know that anything that we're doing like this could disrupt. And plant medicine is really important too, because I don't think people realize how much it opens you up. And then when you're that open, I mean, anything could come through, and it's almost like you're putty afterwards, right? So it's really important for the support. And I have to say, so when we had our session before we had our session, we got on the phone and you're like, I want to talk to you about some things. And I thought it was just going to be like a quick call. And I remember you spending so much time with me, getting to know me, why I want to do this, sharing the modality. And I just want to say thank you for that. That was really beautiful. And I explained how sensitive my body is, because I know my body, I know what I've been through. And, there's a lot of people that it's like, oh, you're creating this because you say this every time. And it's like, no, actually, I know my body now. At 46 years old, I am so deeply connected with my body, with everything I went through. So I know I could almost hold something and know how it's going to affect me. So that's why I want to share with you, okay, listen, I want to do this. I'm open to this, but I'm also deeply sensitive. So I'm more open than most of the world, right? And so you understood that because you talked to me about how you're so sensitive to and open
Yeah.
energetically. And you were just really compassionate about that. And I think that is the key to whether we call yourself a healer, body therapist, facilitator, whatever it is that, you want to be referred to as. That is one of the keys, to listen to someone and honor where they're at. And so you could match that. And when we were doing our work, you were like, I'm going half as much as other people. And I was still feeling so much, right? And so that was important because we're all so different. Bio-individuality. I talk about that all the time, right? Whether it's with what you eat, with supplements you take, it's so important. So I want to say that, I first went to you, I heard about you in Miami, and I was like, oh yeah, let's move the fascia, right? Like I didn't know everything it entailed, but I was like, let's go, I'm into all this, right? So the experience was so powerful, and I want to share a little bit about this. I think this would be helpful for people. I kind of went in being like, my fascia sometimes is tight. Like let's move the fascia, let's move some stuff. And I understand. I've had myofascial release before, and visions come up and things happen. But you were working on me actually, like right around my ribs. I remember, and all of a sudden I saw this image that came out. Now, I'm not going to share all the details of this because it is actually deeply personal. I did share with my podcast, or sorry, not my podcast, my membership. So they know about this, what happened. But there was a scene that all of a sudden came up that happened to me when I was around in junior high. So many, many moons ago. And I remember it was almost like at one point, it was almost like tickling what you were doing. And you were saying like that can happen. Like it was like uncomfortable and tickling. And I remember being like, oh, wait. Like almost like we had to stop for a second. And as I was saying stop, I saw myself saying stop in that situation when I was in junior high that I didn't remember for all these years. And I started crying. And the tears, and you stopped for a moment and we talked, and then I said I keep going. So you were honoring my boundaries, which was really beautiful, and I appreciate that. I want people to know. But when I was saying that to you, I literally was transported back to the scene. Again, that's something that happened that I have not thought about in 20 something years, And I started crying, and I couldn't stop crying, and it was such a cathartic release of coming out my body. And I had no idea that I was holding on to that, because like there's something that happened and I just sort of like moved on, and I was like, no. And right. But my body was storing it. So can you talk a little bit about, just for example, of how my body or how anyone's body was storing that, and why, right? Why was it there, and how do we move it? Anything you want to say in relation to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we call this is traumatic imprints, right? It's like an imprint. And what we want to think about this as like that we have a nervous system, and when we go into survival mode or fight, flight, freeze, fawn response of the nervous system, which is the sympathetic state, uh, it's almost like everything in our body contracts. And so that's a moment of like, right? It's just like, especially the rib cage, especially our rib cage, right? This is the diaphragmatic block, is what we call it in organ therapy. And it's basically where our whole body contracts, where it's that moment when we have to decide to either fight, run, like flee, or freeze, right? Or figure something else out, right? So really, this memory, or like this, like a glitch in the nervous system. Think of it as like a glitch, right? It's like where things go back and forth, where the muscles contract and relax, contract, relax. But this is a point where there's a glitch and the muscles contract, and that energy is trapped in the fascial web.
Yeah.
And so what I do is go in with my hands in specific areas of the body where we are more known to be holding on to these energetic blockages, if you will. And so when I worked with your rib cage, I accessed a blockage and a memory or a traumatic imprint that was trapped in that area. And so by me going in specifically, strategically with my hands, the specific areas where our body has these belts of tension, right? Or like muscular armor is what we call it, or basically it's not just muscular, it's also fascial, right? So when we say muscular armor, which is what they called it in the 1940s and 50s with this technique, Wilhelm Reich, right? But he didn't really understand about fascia, but it's basically fascial armor. And it's again the protective mechanism of our body. It's a natural defensive mechanism that happens when we feel really unsafe. Now, I, for some reason, have a gift where I can
Mhm.
feel with my hands, and with
Yeah.
my body just goes to different areas of the body of my clients,
Yeah, you went
where
right
that
there.
trapped.
You just went right in. You just knew.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't waste time.
Yeah,
I
no,
go
you
right
didn't.
in, and it's funny because you went. There's a moment where you're like, no, no, stop, stop. But that's because we're engaging the armor.
Yeah.
Engaging the armor means I'm triggering you. And I always say this in the beginning of the session to all my clients: do you give me permission and consent to trigger the hell
Yeah.
out of you, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
I'm going to trigger you. Do you give me permission? Are you ready for this? Are you really ready mentally, emotionally to go in to engage your armor? Because the armor is, again, it's all this is, Danielle, is the control mechanism. It's our body
Hmm.
controlling. How we feel safe in our body is through controlling. What does control look like?
Yeah.
Contraction, holding
Yeah.
pattern. It's a holding pattern. I'm a
Yeah.
specialist where I know how to release the holding patterns. And now the holding patterns that we have of muscular tension and armor is what keeps our nervous system in a dysregulated state, where we're showing up in survival mode and stuck there, perhaps. And some of my
Mm.
clients have been stuck there for years. And
Yeah.
so what I'm doing is shifting you out of that and regulating your nervous system. How do I do it? I exaggerate the pattern, which is actually a principle of homeopathy, or like cures like, and I am exaggerating the pattern. So the way that I do this is by throwing you into the chaos state, because there's a part of your body, or there's a part of you that we call it in the therapeutic model, we call it the chaos state. So there's chaos and there's harmony, right? And so going into the chaos means going into that catharsis, exaggerating the catharsis. So triggering the hell out of you to get to a point where you're screaming, laughing, crying, shaking, and having like a really big, dramatic experience. And, or not, right? For some people, that can look very different. It can be
Hmm.
that they're so dissociated where all of a sudden they just feel like a little bit of a shake happening, right? Everybody's different. Everybody's body, right? The bio-individuality.
Yeah.
Every body is different. Every person is completely unique. And I work with, infants and children up until, like, I worked with a 95-year-old woman, right? So it's all
Hmm.
ages, all conditions. I adjust accordingly because I have over 7 different modalities in my healing system, which I call kinetic release therapy, or KRT. It's just a name I had to give, but essentially it's a bunch of tools that I use in my toolkit to be able to support you in healing. So I may use some holotropic breath work. I most of the time will use very deep, penetrating, hands-on, somatic touch therapies, which is an energy work technique. Now, the thing is, it's not like Reiki. I always joke around. This ain't no
Oh yeah,
Reiki.
no,
This is,
not even
yeah,
close.
it is intense. It's
Yeah.
very deep. It's very deep, but it's deep in a very different way. It's nothing like deep tissue work or acupressure or trigger point work. No, this is different. This is where I'm going into specific areas, key areas of our body where we have these belts of tension or muscular armor, where some people are like, oh, is that like the chakras? I'm like, no, because the chakras are just a linear, they're just in the center
Hmm.
channel, and that's just different. I'm
Yeah.
working with Western techniques. I'm not working with Eastern. The one thing that I will say, there's an Eastern principle of the Wu Wei, or like the actual pulling of the energy, which, because orthobionomy, which is one of the modalities that I work with, was developed by a British trained osteopath in the 1970s who was actually a judo instructor. So that's the only thing that's Eastern about what I do, is like there's some influence from judo and like pulling of the energy, but otherwise everything I do is Western based. It's all hands on, it's intense. Um, and then even
Yeah.
the myofascial release I do is the Barnes approach, the Barnes method, which is very
Yeah.
different. We need to be clear here that it's very different than Rolfing, very
Yeah.
different than the myofascial release that people learn in massage school or PTs learn. This is like a specific technique which is working with the fascia in a gentle way. Why gentle with the fascia? Because it's a protective system. So if I'm doing myofascial release, that modality, I'm going to be going into my hands in a very gentle way, which I probably did with
Mhm.
you like later in the session, right? In our session.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, maybe I was using the orgone therapy, which is the energy work, which is the very opposite of that, which is triggering, engaging, intense,
Oh, I was triggered.
painful,
All right.
painful. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the fascial work that I do is I work with the principles of healing, of letting our body heal itself and
Hmm.
self-correct, which is very important. Everything I do is about letting your body heal itself. I'm not here to fix you. I'm not here to
Yeah.
change anything. I'm working with your body, not on your body. And that's the difference between the way that I work
Hmm.
versus other practitioners. Because people always ask me, what makes this different than this or that, And the funny thing is when I tell people I'm a body therapist, they're like, what's that? Like right away they go, is that like chiropractor? I'm like, no. Is that like acupuncture? No. Is that like massage? I'm like, no. Is that like Reiki? No. Is that like, and even if I say energy work, right away people go to Reiki. And I'm like, no, 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 no.
Reiki.
Not
Yeah.
at all. Right? That's not that at all.
Yeah.
It's totally different. And a lot of the techniques and modalities that I work with are very under the radar, and people just don't know about them, unfortunately, because
Yeah.
they're just not popular, right? Like orthobionomy, which is one of them. It's a structural technique that I work with. It's a mouthful, right? It's not very
Hmm.
popular. People don't know what it is. Then there's the Barnes myofascial release, another modality. Then there's the orgone therapy, which is another modality that I will say that people don't know that, but they do know bioenergetics and core energetics. Now, Wilhelm Reich, who developed orgone therapy, his students, two of his students, created these modalities that are way more popular these days, which are called bioenergetics, and another one is called core energetics. So, but they're more like group therapy with energy work. It's different than the one-on-one techniques that I do, which is more coming from the root, the actual like old school like orgone therapy, which is hands-on, um, that was developed because he was a psychoanalyst, Reich, and he discovered that just talking about our emotions or our traumas, just talk therapy alone or psychoanalysis alone is extremely limited. So he was the
Yep.
first person in the
Yeah.
1930s, the first person to introduce touch to psychotherapy.
Mm.
And he was the pioneer, and basically if you think about it, back then that was like way taboo,
That
like
is
people should.
that is that was so cutting edge then. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, he died in
Hmm.
jail. I mean, it's very controversial. Like he
Yeah.
basically ended up dying in jail. They put him in jail for his advanced ideas, and he was a genius. You know, he was
They would
brilliant,
have
way
called
ahead of
him
his time.
misinformation.
Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But yeah. So you know, with this technique, another thing, the reason why there's not a lot of people practicing this is that psychotherapists are not legally allowed to touch their patients or their clients,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I'm a body worker. I was trained as a massage therapist, manual therapist, and I was a manual therapist, structural alignment specialist for years before I got into the somatic therapies. And then I got into the somatic therapies. My techniques kept evolving and evolving and evolving until I got to the point where I am right now, where I'm still learning. I'm still always, I believe in beginner's mind, right? As much as I'm
Yeah.
an expert, I'm still constantly learning
Every
about
day.
the fascia, yeah, about
Hmm.
somatics and about how
Yeah.
the soma just means the body, right? About how our
Hmm.
body and its processes, and how we store trauma. And I will say that the root cause of most of our ailments and our addictions, okay, I believe is trauma.
Yeah.
And so the what I do is the missing link in the healthcare industry, because unfortunately doctors and are not talking about fascia and emotions, because you know why? You don't see fascia or emotions
Yeah.
on x-rays, CAT
Labs.
scans, MRIs,
Yeah.
in your labs, in your blood work. There is no
Yeah.
like like way to see that someone has fascial restriction in the body, and emotional pressure or stress or tension, or some people know the psychosomatic technique of like uh, you know um, Dr. John Sarno, right, which is like
Hmm.
understanding chronic pain and back pain and headaches. So many of our ailments are actually coming from a psychosomatic cause, which means that we're repressing our emotions. And so, what I
Yeah.
do is help people to get out of pain and free them from pain, especially chronic pain, because they could try everything. I've had people who tried surgeries, they tried injections, they tried everything under the sun, and nothing worked because what they were doing is barking up the wrong tree,
Yeah.
right? Barking up the wrong
Hmm.
tree. That's the problem, is that this is the missing link.
Hmm.
We always have
Yep.
to be asking ourselves whenever we're reaching a point where we're like dumbfounded, and the doctors are dumbfounded, and they're like, I don't know what's wrong with you, right? You have chronic pain. I have no idea why. All the tests are showing negative. You always have to go to like, okay, maybe it's my fascia, or maybe it's my emotions, or maybe, trauma, which essentially is the emotions,
Hmm.
right? It's stored emotions in my body that need to be expressed and released. But I will just say one more thing, is that we need to remember breath work, yoga, meditation, psychedelics, hypnosis, plant medicine work, all of that is a top down approach. What I do is a bottom up approach, where I'm going into the somatic experience, into the body, specifically with my hands, to release trapped energy and emotions and trauma. So I've had somebody who went through 30 ayahuasca journeys. And
Yeah.
in one session with me, they were able to release trauma that they didn't even address or access
Yeah.
in any of those experiences. In the same way, I've had people who've done a lot of hypnosis, and they still weren't able to access some of the trauma that was stored, let's say, in their rib cage or in their hips or in their jaw, because they never had anyone actually penetrate the muscular
Hmm.
armor and go into the body. And that's what makes this very unique, and compared to all these other things that are out there, which it's great that these things are out there, but we need to be aware that if we're reaching a plateau, or if we've tried all these other things and we're not getting results, we need to go and take the bottom up approach, which is actually working with the tissues and the muscles and the fascia in this very deep way, not just like a light, like way, which meanwhile, I tell you, I do craniosacral work, I do orthobionomy, which is all very subtle. Even the myofascial, I do very subtle body work, subtle manual therapy. It's incredible. In fact, for structural issues, I can release any knot you have in your body in 5 seconds or less by working with harnessing the power of the nervous system. and
Hmm.
our brain, and very gentle techniques, which are similar to Feldenkrais method or like craniosacral, which is a very gentle positioning of the bones in space, and it stimulates these self-corrective mechanisms of our body, which is the sensors of our nervous system, and we're able to get amazing results in seconds, like rapid, spontaneous healing experiences
Yep.
with these subtle modalities. But we have to realize that for a lot of the trauma work, like the subtle modalities are not going to really like get us there, or may
Hmm.
not get us there. And so then we might need to be going, needing to go deeper, like
Yeah.
physically deeper. Yeah.
Yeah, I've experimented with a lot of modalities over the years, a lot of different things, and I don't think that I would have ever cleared that energy that was stuck there, that trauma there with that situation, if you didn't go in like that. So this is powerful, and I've had a lot of myofascial release, which is also really good. The John Barnes method. I've gone to a lot of practitioners, and it's really good. But your work is so much different, and it's on another level. And so that was really important again because you have to find the right modalities, and there are different modalities for different times. And yeah, I know there's a lot of people in my communities, in my world, that continually go back and do more and more ayahuasca. And I've asked, like, why have you done it 30, 40, 50, 60, 80 times? I'm just curious. And a lot of the reasons I say are the trauma, but I'm like, but is anything changing? Right? Like, why do we keep going back? So I think to me, if we have to keep going back to something a million times, is it moving the needle, or is it becoming another addiction, right? And so that could be with plant medicine, that could be with anything in our life. I think there's a balance there, and as we're learning, the body
Yeah.
needs to have balance as well, and you're helping facilitate that. And I want to make a comment about Lyme. you know the Lyme community is very interesting. They are so quick to throw darts, they're so quick to judge. I've been ridiculed, yelled at, bullied online for the way I talk about my experience with Lyme. And at the end of the day, again, I always share it was my experience with Lyme. And I moved through Lyme, I believe, a lot quicker than unfortunately a lot of people do, because people sometimes have it for 10 years and they're struggling and suffering. And I believe I did because I started listening to my soul. I started listening to the messages of, who I need to talk to, where I need to go. And most importantly, every disease and every illness, yes, it's physical, and there's also a spiritual component and an emotional component. So I worked with that, and I worked with a lot of traumas that I had to address from childhood, right? That to someone else, you might have just been like, oh, that wasn't a big deal. But, for me, it was, right? And so with any ailment, we're faced with looking at the body holistically. And again, I just did another podcast, I talked about Lyme, but I always want to throw it out there because even if people make fun, even if the Lyme community cannot accept that because they just want to get their antibiotics and do that, but then be sick for another 10 years, right? Like, and my heart breaks for that. There's someone listening here that can try something else, that can try this, can do a different modality and tap into their emotions and understand how deeply connected the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, the mental, all the bodies are intertwined. It's not separate. Again, and that's why I named my podcast Cosmic Body. Like, that's the most important thing. So thank you again for bringing that up and just sharing all that. I want to ask about your hands. There's lots of stuff there. I've in Kundalini activations, in just being so deeply in love with someone, and having a real, like, intimate heart to heart talk and moment with someone. My hands got activated, and I almost felt like I said to him, I was like, I feel like I can cure cancer right now, because I felt like there were beams shooting from my hands. And we obviously have our chakra points all over our body. We have in our hands, and that's where things channel through. So, can you talk to us a little bit about how you feel like your hands are healing and they're a gift?
Yeah, well, first off, it's funny. I have an interesting relationship with my hands because I'm double jointed and my
Oh,
hands are crooked and I have like small thumbs and like I have very interesting fingers, almost like alien hands, you know? And
well, there you
so
go.
I,
That's
I
already starting it off.
yeah, so I have an interesting, relationship with my hands. Ever since I'm a kid, I was always like very self-conscious about my hands. and my feet, but I won't go there with the feet. So, but essentially, like I found myself just uh, called to like just I like touching people's bodies. It's really weird. And again, like I said, from a young age, from the age of 3, I was already walking on my dad's back because my dad is like a
Mm.
massage enthusiast, right? So he loves body work. And so everything with him is like, oh, this feels so good, like massage, body work, right? So I basically just started to just enjoy it as well because I'm like, oh my God, that feels really good, right? So when you have parents who are into this, then it easily, you start to learn. And I just always found myself fascinated with muscles and with bones and like the body and anatomy. Like I'm like a mad scientist. I love uh, studying anatomy and physiology and understanding. I could spend days in the body's exhibit, just looking at cadavers um, and somehow I am able to feel things with my hands that most people can't. And I found this out later on where I'm like, you mean you can't feel that right there? How there's like a knot in the tissue or how there's like an energy block here? And most people can't. So it was really fascinating to me that I just, from an early age, just found myself drawn to working with my hands, being good with my hands. I even had this one client of mine who I used to help in Brooklyn years ago, and he was like, I need you to help me with my wheelchair with the air to fill the tire. And I'm like, why? Like, what is it? Like, okay. I'm like, why me? He's like, because you're really good with your hands. I feel like you're going to be
Mm.
able to get it. There's like this thing. And I got it in like a
Yes.
second. And he was like, you see, you're good with your hands. And I'm like, okay. And through the years, people kept telling me like, oh my gosh, every time people feel my hands, they're like, oh my God, it's like you have golden hands, magic hands. Like, they
Mhm.
give me all these names and like, wizard and magician and just like, I don't know. I just found myself just, that I have really good hands. And I don't really think about it like you with Danielle with like the laser beams or whatever, or being able to like or seeing anything, but I can feel things, right? I can
Yeah.
feel different textures in people's bodies. I can feel where there's something going on in someone's body, almost like a medical medium of some sort, where I
Yeah,
can feel, okay,
absolutely.
this is, you got to check this out, go see a doctor. I don't
Right.
know what this is, what's going on with your liver right now. I'm feeling
Right.
something really dense there. But yeah, I just feel like also because I've been placing my hands on people's bodies all these years, at this point, I've worked with over 10,000 humans, through
Yeah.
the years. And so I've just gotten really good at like, I have very heightened senses of intuition through my hands where I can feel things with my hands that, um, you know, uh, MRIs and CAT scans and X-rays cannot see anything. There's like, let's say fascial restrictions. When our fascial web gets restricted and tied, I can feel that. Whereas unfortunately, like MRIs are not going to show where we have fascial restrictions in the body. But it's important to note that like if you have a fascial restriction in your shoulder, that sometimes releasing the foot on
Mm.
the opposite side of the body may actually
Yeah.
release that fascial restriction in the foot. It's a full body system. So that's
Yeah.
where it gets complicated and complex and fascinating. And to me, I'm like, I love it. It's like I get excited when I have to figure out, okay, what's the cause of this? Where's the pull happening? Like this, like a sweater that's like, you pull the thread on the sweater,
Yeah.
or I think of the fascial web as like this wetsuit, right? We're wearing like a full body wetsuit. It's a full body
That's a
system.
good
Very
analogy. Yeah.
different. Yeah, it's very different than like muscles. And muscles like the bicep muscle, it does this. And you think about muscles and
Yeah.
bones and joints as like levers and pulleys. Our body doesn't work like that. It's important that everybody understands that the body
Mm.
does not move like that, function like that at all. It's actually complete. It's a myth. Just like there's a big myth and deception with pain, where our back pain is actually happening from herniated discs or bulging discs. This is completely false. 90,
Interesting.
90 to 95% of the time, our pain in our body, whether it's back pain or even sometimes knee pain, our pain is not from a structural dysfunction or deformity. It's actually from emotions and
Hmm.
pressure in the fascial web.
Yeah.
Now, the doctors and the physical therapists and the chiropractors are not going to tell you this. Why? Because
Yeah.
it's a big pain deception. It's there to keep you coming back to treat symptoms and not treating the cause. What I do is treat the cause. And why do I do this? Because I've realized through the years going through my own healing experiences and my own aches, pains, surgeries, and all these experiences, including cluster headaches, like everything I've been through
Yeah.
has made me educated in understanding anatomy, physiology, how the body works, how the emotions get stored and trapped in our body, how the fascial web gets highly pressurized. That's really all it is. Let's keep it really simple.
Yeah.
It's pressure in the fascia, and if the container is pressurized and the nerves are in that container, then guess what? We're going to have pain on pain sensitive areas. So if you're going to have pain in your knee, it has nothing to do with your knee. It has to do with the fascia very often, not always. If you
Right.
have pain in your lower back because you have a herniated disc in your lower back or a bulging disc or spondylolisthesis or any fancy, name that the doctor says to scare you and to show you on an MRI or an X-ray or like, look, they're showing you something. Look, that's why you have pain. But what I'm here to say is if you give me 100 people right now from the street and I just take an MRI, an X-ray of 100 people's bodies, that so many of these people are going to have some sort of structural deformity and have absolutely no pain. So what that tells us is that there's a big, big lie that people need to
Mhm.
wake up to. And Dr. John Sarno knew this, and that's why he had that book, Healing Back Pain. So I will say that if anybody's suffering from back pain or headaches, like read this book because just reading that book alone can heal your pain without any
Beautiful.
physical manual touch or therapy or physical therapy or massage or chiro or PT or acupuncture or all these soft tissue work, or like let's say structural body work,
Yeah.
you know.
Wow. I hope and I pray for the day when we fully accept that the emotions almost impact everything, right? I, it's so clear to me as someone that sees things. Well, especially after everything I went through, then it was like, oh, it got blasted open. And it's like so clear and so obvious to me. But yet, most of the world still can't handle it and they make fun of it. You see it. I talk about things all the time like this online. And so many people in the world are not there yet. And that's okay because everyone's on their own journey. But that's my dream. That's my goal that they actually wake up to the truth of who they are. And that's why I do this podcast. And that's why I share the crazy things I do. And just even yesterday, I shared about aliens, and someone was like, "You're so brave for saying this." And I'm like, "Brave?" I'm like, "I don't really care." I'm like, we're going to live our lives anyways, and might as well live 100,000% authentic to myself because people are going to make fun of me anyways. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Like I'm living through my heart and being myself. And so that's so important. Thank you for
Yeah,
everything that you've
radical
shared.
honesty.
Love it.
Radical
Always.
honesty. Yes, I
Always. I
believe
am
in
so
that.
honest.
Being authentic,
It's
clear,
wild.
honest. It's going to trigger people. Some
Yeah, it
people
does.
are not going to like it. Not
Yeah.
everybody's going to like us. That's okay.
It's okay
That's
because it
okay.
doesn't matter because when it comes down, when you like you, it doesn't really matter. You're like, okay, like fine, like I'm not for you, and that's okay. Like I wish you well. I don't hate you. I've had so many people follow my accounts and tell me that they were triggered, they unfollowed, and then they came back years later and they're like, I'm ready for this now. And like now you're my favorite account. Or like now I listen to, I like to hear the things you have to say. So it's just everyone's on their own journeys, and it's like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, fine, you don't like me, you like me, it's cool. I'm still gonna do me, I'm good, I'm happy. Right. And that's the most important thing. And that's what I try to lead by example from. I have an important question for you, though. One of the most
Sure.
important questions, everything. So, if I remember correctly, you're a Cancer sun. Is that correct
I
for
don't
your
know.
zodiac?
I'm a Taurus.
Oh,
I'm a
you're a Taurus.
Taurus.
Why did I think you're a Cancer?
Yeah, May 9th,
Oh, you
79.
are a Taurus.
Yeah, I don't know,
Okay.
but I don't know the details of the different, yeah.
Okay. For some reason, I thought and I remember that you were a Cancer. Maybe you have some kind of Cancer moon. We're going to look this up. I'm curious because also I'm curious if your Mercury, do you know where your Mercury is? Is it in Gemini? I'd be
No
curious
idea.
because Mercury can only be like the sign you're in for your sun sign, front or back of that. So it's very possible that you could have a Mercury in Gemini, and Mercury rules your speech, your communication, and it's also ruled by the hands. And so they are very, tactile and
Hmm.
And there's gifts with that. So I'm actually very curious. We can pull up your chart later and I want to see. So I felt some Cancer energy. So there's probably some Cancer in your chart somewhere. So we're gonna dive in and find out.
Okay. Yeah,
Beautiful.
I mean, I will say about Taurus is that we usually are
The
really
body.
mothering, healing. We're a lot of Taurians are very are healers, and so for
Mhm.
me, I
The
love giving.
physical
I'm all
body.
about giving. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, Taurus rules the physical body. So I mean, it's like
yeah.
doing body work.
So it
I'm
makes
like,
sense that I'm a
you're
body
probably
worker.
a Taurus or a Virgo. You have some kind of Earth in
Yeah,
there for sure. Yeah, I love
yeah.
that so much. We have a gift for everyone. So you never give discounts, and I understand that because it's you working on it. This is very high level stuff, and it takes your time. However, I have convinced you to give my audience, anyone that's listening, if you mention my name, 15% off. So this is very rare. You never do this. But somehow we came to this agreement. Somehow I'm making it so dramatic,
Yes.
but I did. I convinced you. I asked you and I begged you, come on, please. And so we're doing this. So if you
Yeah.
mention my name, you get 15% off his services. Thank you for that.
Yeah. Of course, of course. Yeah, I'm happy to do it. I mean, I can do that now too because it's a summer month, so it's a little bit slower for me. But I actually do have a wait list, so let's just
Mhm.
say that right now.
Yeah.
Those of you who want to work with me in person, one-on-one, I do have a wait list for a while between Miami and New York. And there is also a wait list of people who are waiting for me right now in LA, as well as other locations that I'll be traveling, possibly Europe in July. So hopefully European tour in July. And the reason
Amazing.
why I do travel a bunch is because unfortunately there's not a lot of people who do this work.
Yeah.
But if somebody cannot get to me in person, I do offer Zoom sessions and virtual sessions. People always ask me, how does that even work? You're a body worker. How are you? And it's your hands. The gift is in your hands. You're a body worker. How does that work with Zoom? Well, the way it works is that I had no choice over COVID. My clients weren't able to see me, and I discovered that I can actually teach people how to self-treat. Okay, I can
Mm,
teach you how to press into different areas of your body where you have the energetic blockages to actually trigger yourself, or have a loved one or a friend or somebody
yeah.
nearby, or even a body worker that you work with, showing them and guiding them how to do this on your body. I can also use holotropic breath work as a technique and trigger you in that way, and hold space for you. Those sessions are about an hour, give or take, whereas in-person sessions are a 2 hour experience with an eye mask, and think of it like a psychedelic experience of body work without the psychedelics,
Hmm.
or a sober psychedelic experience, as a friend of mine says. And then we have a week of coaching and support, which is very important. So it's a more like a program. But my Zoom sessions are just Zoom sessions, way more affordable. It is an investment to work with me. Yes, I
Hmm.
will say that. But the Zoom sessions are also more affordable, and they let a lot of different types of people with different incomes to be able to actually have access to this type of healing potential.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And that's so important. And where can people find you? What is your website?
So it's kinetic body therapy. So KINETIC bodytherapy.com. Also on social media, one word, kinetic body therapy. Mostly on Instagram, but now I'm slowly going towards TikTok too, as well. Uh,
That'll
but
be good.
uh, but yeah, I'm on YouTube as well. Got some great content on YouTube and great videos. Lots of great podcast interviews as well. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you for today. Thank you so much for sharing your magic and your gift. And I really hope people open their minds and their body to how everything is so deeply connected. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Danielle.